Would you open the door?
What do you want?
You're in trouble.
What?
Would you just open the door? I am telling you that there is someone in there with you. Why do you want it?
He took my sister's life. I want to see what was going through his mind. You said I should visit on Danny's anniversary.
The thought of another patient showing up at the front door here.
Would you allow them in?
Of course not.
My sister would never allow a strange man into her home in the middle of the night.
She's saying some weird things to me, Dad.
She's clearly not well.
Do you mind staying out here alone at night?
I'm just telling you what I saw.
Daddy's ghost. My dead wife is not haunting this house.
What is this?
Put them back! This is not real. As I've always believed, there's nothing that can't be explained.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, all you creepy blind psychics. Hey, actually, if any of them are listening, I would love to speak to them, because then maybe they'll tell me when I'll finally get a fucking job. Anyway, how the hell are you doing, Mike?
They'll need an item that's close and personal to you that has touched your skin.
Personal items work best.
Well, I'm doing well. I literally just finished up the movie a couple hours ago at the theater, so glad to talk about it. It's actually fresh on my mind, which isn't always the case, but also with us, it's Don and Ellie. How's it going, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right, so this week we managed to get to the theater to see one that's I'd classify as like a wide limited release. It's probably playing in most cities, but not necessarily in every theater. Out here, it was in multiplexes, but just not my go-to one that's like right by my house. So I didn't have to go like way out of the way to see it, but I did have to go to a different theater. But I thought it was worth it. Mostly, yeah, I went into this one pretty blind. I didn't know a whole lot about it ahead of time, other than the main thing was from the director of Caveat. So I was like, well, based on that movie, I want to go see it. And luckily, I didn't have to make a long drive. So cool. And it is called Oddity. And the synopsis is: a psychic medium attempts to uncover the truth behind her sister's murder at the site of the crime. Nice synopsis, short and sweet, gives you kind of a setup without giving away too much at all. So with that, we will get into general thoughts. Venom, what did you think of Oddity?
My friends, in the 6 years that we've been doing Fresh Cuts / just the movies, as was its original title when we started, I don't remember ever reviewing two movies in a row that had the potential to be the best movies of the year. And my friends, here we are. Last week, we talked about Longlegs, which is potentially my favorite movie of the year. And then a week later, out comes Oddity, which is now easily a top 3 candidate for me for the year. I can't put it up above Longlegs, but we'll talk about a little bit more about the comparative issues between the two. But yeah, man, this movie was stellar. I had a great time with this one. Whereas Longlegs has this sustained sense of dread from beginning to end, this movie has a sense of dread whenever you're in that house. When you're in that house, I mean, the house itself is such a weird looking house with its kind of open style, and almost looks like a motel, like a converted, fancy hotel or something. But just the sense of dread when you're inside of this house, and then the sense of dread that comes once they set up a certain MacGuffin in this movie, which if you've seen the trailer, you know what we're talking about. The great thing about this director, Damian McCarthy, I mean, he's only done 2 movies, but both of his movies have very major MacGuffins in them. If you remember the bunny stuffed animal from the first movie, which does make an appearance in this movie, which officially makes Oddity and Caveat occur in the same universe. So I'm not sure if Damian McCarthy is building a cinematic universe, but he's kind of slowly getting there. Kind of like Michael Dougherty with Krampus and Trick or Treat occurring in the same universe. But yeah, my God, back to Oddity. This is one of those films where the mystery of who committed the act isn't necessarily the main mystery of the movie. It's kind of like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. Those of you familiar with Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, we find out who the killers are in the very opening scene of that movie. And then the rest of the movie is just kind of, will they get away with it? How will they get caught? Things like that. In this movie, it's not quite the exact same formula, but we find out in the second act who the perpetrator of the catalyst crime of this movie is. And it's not really much of a shock, in all honesty. I mean, they do a pretty good job. Damien does a pretty good job with his red herrings and setting up potential suspects and things like that. And ultimately, one of the very first red herrings in the movie turns out to be, the actual killers. But like I said, the strength of this movie isn't necessarily in the murder plot and how it's found out. It's how this sister, the surviving sister of the original murder, how is she going to get her revenge? How is she going to either expose the killer/killers, maybe, and how are they going to come to justice? And I, as a very petty and vindictive person, absolutely love that formula. I love seeing people get their comeuppance, especially when you get the motivation of the crime in this movie. It just becomes so fucking petty that you want to see these people, get their comeuppance for what they did. The wooden man in this movie is, holy crap, he is unnerving from the first moment you see him, with that silent scream look on its face. The whole time something's going to happen. Is it going to rise up and actually move? Is it just a catalyst for something else, like a conduit for something else that's going to appear in the movie? The mystery behind the wooden man is really where the strength of this movie lies. And then once we get to our third act, like I said, my petty vindictive nature is just so sated with this movie. I will admit I'm not ultra happy with how it ended. Not that I don't like the ending. I do like the ending. It's a very obvious ending that's set up in the first act of the film. But I'm the kind of person that wants to see. I don't want to just know that the villain is going to get their just desserts. I'm the kind of person that wants to see it. But ultimately, this movie is so well made. The sense of dread throughout, the editing style. I mean, it has a lot of similarities to Longlegs in that, overarching sense of dread throughout the entire film. Amazing performance by Carolyn Brackett. I'm going to be fully honest and admit I did not realize she played both sisters the first time I watched this. I've watched this movie 3 times now. Yes, it's that good, my friends. I watched it every day this weekend. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, after the first watch, I didn't realize that was Carolyn Brackett playing both roles. She does such a great job of playing 2 completely different personalities with different eye colors and hairstyles, and even their vocal inflection is very different. Her voice is a little bit higher pitched than her sister Danny, or should I say Darcy's voice is a little bit higher pitched than Danny. She just does such a great job of playing these 2 twin sisters, but making them 2 completely different personalities. Like I said, my friends, to the point where I thought it was 2 different actresses after watching it the first time. Obviously, as I'm watching the credits, it's like, oh, okay, it was the same person playing both characters. So yeah, she is definitely the driving force of this movie. Her performance mostly as Darcy, obviously Danny being the sister who is murdered. And if you've seen the trailer for this movie, you kind of know the setup already. The trailer actually has a cold open that's pretty much the exact same cold open that we get in our film. So a great little mystery. I love the way the information is fed to us. We get little bits of information. We don't get the whole plot explained to us all at once. We get little bits of information. And just the way that it's fed to us, I just thought it's stellar. For a director who's only on his second movie, this is some amazing film work right here. Like, I mean, well, we talked about Oz Perkins last week and Longlegs, and this guy who has less than half the movies that Oz Perkins has under his belt, and he's also putting together these beautiful shot movies, beautifully shot, beautiful set design. Even the costume design, I gotta say, in this movie, I don't know if you guys noticed, but this movie is very obviously set in modern times because everybody has cell phones, and they're complaining about the lack of signal in this house. Yet, a lot of people in this movie dress like they're not from our current decade. Like our main character, Ted Timmis, Dr. Timmis, he dresses like he's a doctor from the 60s. Like he's not dressing in modern clothes. It's kind of interesting. Same thing with Danny, his wife, who kind of wears granny sweaters. Like it almost looks like she's wearing Mrs. Voorhees' sweater, but it's a different color in the one scene in the film that she's in. And then Darcy, especially because we were introduced to Darcy in her oddities shop, her collectibles and oddities shop, that it makes sense because the shop itself looks like a time capsule. It looks like it's something out of the 60s. So for her to dress in the style, you know, almost like a granny style, I think some people might call it, conservative granny. But it works. It just so works. So even though we're seeing cell phones, we're seeing modern electric cars, but then we're seeing, you know, houses that are definitely over 100 years old and fashions that are not of the time period. It makes for a beautiful, just aesthetic for this movie. I love the mystery of it. I love how it's, like I said, I like how the information is fed to us, you know, just little bits of information as you need it to keep your interest peaked throughout the film. And then once we get to the end of the film and we have all the information, then it's just a matter of that final set piece and how that's going to come about. And yeah, overall, I love this movie. I mean, like I said, it is solidly a top 3. Between Longlegs, Late Night with the Devil, and now Oddity. I'm not sure what the 1, 2, 3 order as of right now would be. I'd have to watch all 3 of them, but those are solidly my 3 favorite movies of the film, of the year. So yeah, Oddity, highly recommend. Unfortunately, by the time most of you guys listen to this review, it's probably already going to be out of theaters, and you're going to have to wait for the Shudder release, which, from what I understand, is September. Unfortunately, if you didn't get a chance to see it in theaters for its 1-week run, you're going to have to wait until its release on Shudder in September. But my friends, it is so worth it. This was just such an off-putting movie, unnerving. Like I said, maybe a half step below Longlegs in its sustained dread, but just a beautiful movie with great performances, great villains. A great wooden man. I mean, just the design of that wooden man is so off-putting. It just having it, showing it just sitting there at the dinner table, it's just an instant sense of dread of, oh, is this thing going to get up? Is it going to move? Is it going to start talking? Like, what the hell's going on? So yeah, my friends, Oddity gets my highest recommendation. Like I said, if you're fortunate enough to hear this review and it's still playing in theaters, seek it out. Make the drive. If you got to drive like 45 minutes to an hour to see this, I'm going to tell you right now, it's worth it. I absolutely love this movie. So yeah, definitely a top 3 candidate for the year for me. And I'll cut off my general thoughts here before I take over the whole show.
All righty. Let's kick it over to Dawn for your thoughts on Oddity.
I'm right there with Venom, although I would probably... I put this over Longlegs just because I wasn't as enthused with it. I'm not a huge fan of the serial killer police procedural stuff that you are. So I would put Longlegs towards the back end of my list. And I I would probably easily say Oddity is top 5 at worst, top 3 best. Yeah, I really like this one. I think the atmosphere here is the best thing. I mean, you said it, that the house is just absolutely chilling. The way that it all plays out, the different ceremonies that go through, just the way that the shadows play inside the house, it just has this just unnerving quality. And the more it unveils, the different creatures that get unveiled. I mean, you brought up the wooden man. I mean, I can't agree again more with what he said. That's just fantastic, the way that he appears. Trying to think back on anything else that he said. I mean, yeah, you covered a lot of what I was going to say. I mean, yeah, the revelations about what goes on, and the Hitchcockian overtones here, where you're trying to really, you're on the journey of trying to realize how they're going to get away with it, or if they're going to get away with it, not who did it. I think that adds a really fun touch here. It may have played a little bit better if we didn't know. I think it could have been fun to play out and see when she reveals who did it. If we would have found out, I think that it may have been fun to see how this would have played out in that sense, where we don't know who did it. I can't say that it would have been better, but I think it would have been fun to see how that would have played out, because yeah, that does take a lot of the sting out of the finale. It does kind of have like a pretty weak finish. I think that's what may, like I said earlier, it may bump it down to a top 5 rather than a top 3 where it belongs. But again, what we still get here, I think it's really, really interesting. Not necessarily as much of a scare film, but more just, the unnerving dread of what's going on. We do get a couple of decent kills here, which is kind of surprising because I wasn't really expecting much with such a small cast. I really wasn't expecting much. I figured we'd maybe get 1 or 2, and then maybe some, maybe a couple more like like background stories where we figure out what's going on, and then that's there's more kills from that than the main cast here. But sorry, overall, yeah, I really enjoyed it. A little bit more my style than Long Legs, which is why I think it's a little bit better. But I mean, still, Long Legs and this are just great. That's a fun double bill there. Really glad we're starting to get some good films here, because I mean, we all know the struggles of how we went into, I think, with April or May, where we weren't really having much of anything. And yeah, ever since then, there's been such a steady stream of quality stuff coming out. It's really nice to see my list forming out. I mean, we're in the back half of the year now because we're past the halfway point. So yeah, starting to see a list take shape and come together with stuff like this these last 2 weeks. It's a great change of pace, and I'm really glad to see that it has turned the corner. I mean, like I said, just for me, I think the main thing is just ending on a stronger note. I mean, again, we have to take what we get, and if we would have found out what was going on when, I'm not even going to bother trying to remember which twin was which, but when the medium finds out who was responsible, I think if we would have found out at that point, it may have been a little bit more interesting, and maybe given the finale, something other than the cliched finish that it ends up going with. But it again, that's generally the only issue, and I can't say that it really is a genuine issue, just because fantasy booking a different storyline is not what we're doing here. We're going with what we have, and what we have is a great entry. Yeah, just after caveat in this one, yeah, I'm really on board with this guy. Really intrigued to see where he goes with feature number 3. Yeah, just again, atmosphere setup. Love the reveals along the way. Just a great main villain. I mean, the Woodman is somebody I wouldn't mind seeing again, and something else down the road. But either way, yeah, definitely recommend this one. Trying to think here. Yeah, I mean, again, most of the stuff was mentioned. And again, I just like I said, this one is just more my speed than Long Legs, but either way, you can't go wrong with either one. So yeah, definitely give this one a shot. Again, Shutter may probably be a more viable option for most people just because of the greater accessibility. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed this one, and I had a lot of fun with it. And again, I'm right there, top 5 at worst, maybe top 3, but we'll see how it goes. But I'm saying top 5 at worst. But yeah, I guess back to you, Mike.
Okay. We'll start with the bad first. Some old couple bought tickets right next to me and proceeded to fall asleep 10 minutes before the movie started, so I had to deal with that. All having nothing to do with the movie itself, but in a half-filled theater. Why did you buy tickets in a row where there were no other seats taken? I don't know how that happened, but I dealt with it, and the greatness of the movie helped me deal with it because, yes, I will go with the chorus here. I thought this movie was extremely well done. If a little comparison to Longlegs, I think we were in agreement last week that Longlegs had kind of a sense of dread throughout, where I think this one, McCarthy is a master so far at just creating a sense of eeriness. Like his use of angles and light, shadows, and he makes like the non eerie things seem eerie at all times. The setting was great. Venom, something you touched on was how they kind of dressed from the 60s. I almost want to, like, I can't say for sure, but it almost felt like a conscious decision because to me, this story, the way it was crafted, almost felt like an old school like Hammer or like the British like 60s horror movies set in a modern time. And it didn't have to be like in your face about it. It was just the way the story was constructed as like kind of like a mystery. We have the case of a murder and we're trying to figure it out, and we're getting pieces of the puzzle, pieces of the story as it goes in a not necessarily linear fashion. Lots of flashbacks, lots of pieces, lots of character, or not lots of characters, but the characters get introduced to what role they kind of played and what happened. And yes, the Wooden Man from the first time you see it, and I love like the kind of like the build up to it too, because the way it's kind of introduced to the characters before it's even introduced to us. I love like our little mini shout out, or it was like, yeah, one of the cool moments of like, hey, the bunny from Caveat. And I was thoroughly invested in the story, and I definitely agree too. Like the way this movie plays out, I actually think about at the halfway point, or once you know enough about the characters, it's not overly difficult to kind of put together probably what happened, because I can't remember exactly at what point, but I started to think, okay, I think this is what happened. But it affected the rest of my, or it affected my enjoyment for the rest of the movie zero, because I don't think it's 100% important that they kept it a secret. This isn't like an M. Night movie where once you know the big twist, it might take down the rewatchability. I don't think that matters. As far as the ending, it's not so much the final. Well, okay, I will say it's. I think I know what you guys are referring to. Wishing there was more. My only issue with the ending, it's not even like a huge issue, but it kind of made me second guess, because I was like, if I'm this character and I receive that, like, I ain't bringing it inside the house. Like after everything that's happened, when I see the postmark or the address that it came from, nah, I'm either leaving it outside or like, nope, I'm not even taking the risk. But all that aside, it wasn't even a huge nitpick. But yeah, the sound design. And the other thing I like about this guy is he knows how to create a jump scare, but he doesn't rely on jump scares, because just the eerie atmosphere itself, half the time when there is no jump scare or no jump scare happens, you're still kind of on the edge, like waiting for things to happen. And I love the other reason that I felt like this was kind of a throwback story, just because the sinister nature of the characters themselves and what they're capable of doing. That's something you get in like the 50s and the 60s. It's not always like a huge supernatural villain necessarily. Sometimes it's just the nature of mankind and what they're willing to do to like eliminate problems. But yeah, great setup. And that's the other thing is like the setup of the movie almost makes you think like, okay, this is the jumping off point, but really it was kind of a table setter, and then you just kind of get spun around in different aspects in order to put together the puzzle. But overall, really great effort here. For a second feature, I mean, damn. Now, like I kind of feel like I did after I saw his first movie. I'm like, well, now I want to see what he does next. I'm very interested to see what happens, because to me, I was a fan of Caveat, but like to me, this took such a big jump as it is. It's like, well, are we going to expect that these jumps are going to be this big? Because wow. But other than that, it's like a lot of what you guys already said. I'm just a victim of always going last, so sometimes I just don't have a lot to add on top. But I do agree. This is, as it stands now, I am probably going to say it's top 3. And then, where in the top 3, that'll be decided upon later. Or maybe it'll get pushed out because we still got some potential bangers coming out. But other than that, yeah, really, really good movie. I don't know how long it's going to be in the theater. It might be like a one weekend warrior. Yeah. If not, and it gets a second weekend out of like maybe a decent showing, I really implore people to go see. There, a lot of people I've talked to haven't even seen Caveat. So like I would say, and that's still playing on Shudder. So if anything, I would say, okay, if you can't go see Oddity, immediately watch Caveat, get yourself an idea of what this director is all about, and then go see the movie where he like ramps it up a few decimals. So very good. Oddity, total success to me. Back to you, Venom.
I'm going to make a very bold statement here. This movie is the best second watch I've had since Hereditary. The second watch of this movie was so goddamn enjoyable. All of the nods and the winks and the little like foreshadowing that obviously you're not going to notice the first time you watch the movie, but man, just all of the little winks and nods, which I obviously can't get into in the general section here. Some of them involve spoilers, but goddamn, sitting in the theater the second and third time, I'm just like, this guy's an auteur. Like this guy is legitimately becoming a master of horror. Like, goddamn. I mean, Caveat. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say. Oh yeah, and to harken back to what I was saying about the hammer, the one thing I forgot to say is like I could totally see like a Peter Cushing or a Vincent Price or a Christopher Lee in some of these roles, like the way they were constructed, because it was kind of hitting me as I was sitting there in the theater, like, wow, this is how you do modern. I don't even want to say retelling, because I don't know if it follows any specific story from that era, but just the style. It's how you do it without like, you don't have to throw up a poster of like movies. You don't have to like necessarily hit us over the head with like a soundtrack of music from then. It's just, if you have the understanding of how those movies are constructed, you can do it with just the minimal, like I would say like the setting, definitely like the old stone structure house, like almost that alone is just enough. Just our main kind of set piece is enough, and like you said, the characters kind of dressing in an older school way. But other than that, nothing really hits you over the head of like, oh, you're trying to do this. It just kind of comes to you at a certain point, like, wow, this it feels like that's what I'm watching, even though it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you talk about Hammer, because I kind of had that same sense the third time I was watching it. I'm watching it and I'm thinking, man, if this was a Hammer film, I can already see the cast. I mean, literally, you put Peter Cushing as Dr. Timmis. You put Christopher Lee as Ivan. And then you could either do like Barbara Steele or someone along those lines as Darcy and Danny, and literally Peter Boyle as Olin Bull. I mean, like the cast is all set for this movie as a classic Hammer film.
I mean, I had Deborah Paget, but I mean, I don't mind that either.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're all Hammer fans here, but yeah, goddamn. I mean,
for me, I had Deborah Paget in the twin role, but.
Okay, I can go with that. I was also thinking Roman Polanski's wife, but I forgot her name already. But She was from the Fabulous
Yeah,
Vampire Killers.
yeah, I know who you mean. For
Yeah.
some reason,
Oh,
Shannon Tweed.
not Tweed. Damn it. Uh, that,
Tate.
Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate. There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Sharon Tate. Yes. So I only say this because of her role in Fabulous Vampire Killers, where she's a very nice, sweet girl at the beginning, but then she turns and becomes this evil vampire chick, and it's that dual role again. That's why I was kind of thinking of that. Though I'm sure there's plenty of great examples of great actresses from the Hammer era that could do the dual role thing. So yeah, but man, this thing is absolutely a Hammer film, but. And like I said, the second watch was so goddamn fun. This is a movie that I strongly recommend. Unfortunately, because it's probably not going to get a long theatrical run, if you're listening to this, even if we get this episode out as fast as possible and you're listening to this, like Monday the 22nd or Tuesday the 23rd, it potentially might already be gone from theaters because, movies like this, especially movies like this that might play in a multiplex but only get like 1 or 2 screenings a day. Yeah, I mean, you're lucky if you get more than a 1 week run. But my friends, if you get the chance to see this in theaters, take it. Like I said, if you got to drive to get to a theater that's still showing it, it's 100% worth it. This is definitely a theatrical film. I don't think it's not going to be as good at home, but in a darkened theater where the movie has your full attention, no devices, no kids or family members running around. That's when this movie shines, because there's some scenes that are so dark you almost don't know what you're looking at. Like the scene when Ivan breaks his ankle, it's so dark, all you can really see is a little tiny bit of red near his ankle, and then of course the sound effect to kind of imply that he broke his ankle. But that's what I mean, this movie isn't heavy-handed too with almost all of its information. It feeds it to us in a way that's incredibly palatable, and it makes sense. Like, none of it is confusing. This story is not convoluted or complicated in any way. It has twists and turns, yes, but it's still a very simple, isolated story that 100% works for me. And even though, I'll fully admit, even though the ending doesn't deliver what I wanted to see because I'm a petty bastard, it still works. I mean, because we all know what's going to happen to that character when the camera goes black. There's no, it's explained to us earlier in the movie. So, and that's another thing. Like I said, just the way that this movie does its foreshadowing and everything. And honestly, I'm going to disagree with Mike. Mike said that if our final character gets that package and sees what it is, that he would just not touch it. I say the complete opposite. This guy is such a douchebag who's so fixated with science and logic that throughout the entirety of the movie, he doesn't believe any of the supernatural things that are being explained to him. Even when someone flat out explains a situation that only he's privy to, and he knows that she's telling the truth and that she's correct, he still kind of, I'm not even sure what the point I'm trying to make is, but just the way that everything, the foreshadowing is done, the way that the MacGuffins are done, the scene in the shop when we actually see the bunny from Caveat. And I know a lot of people are going to say that it's not the bunny from Caveat because the bunny in Caveat played a drum, whereas the bunny in this movie has the cymbals, kind of like the cymbal playing monkey dolls that we've seen in many horror movies, Monkey Shines.
Yeah.
But it's still the same bunny. I went back and checked. It's got the same eyes, the same ears. I guess at some point after it was retrieved from the house in Caveat, someone replaced the drums with cymbals. Is really the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely the bunny, which is great to see. Like I said.
It's too similar. And to like say we accidentally put a bunny in here that looks just like it. No, it's the bunny. Exactly. I guess the one thing I forgot to say was I like the fact that like nobody ends up like scot-free or clean in this movie. Nope. I guess you could argue that one character technically escaped the worst of it, but their life is not going to be the same going forward. Yep. So, but even like the good characters in this, like things happen, and like I feel like that's cool because it's like I feel like I'm trying to really dance around it. The characters that go in with a righteous cause, they kind of, you get the feeling at a certain point they know that, like, well, it could meet my demise too, but I'm still determined to do something about what I felt was an injustice. And if it means something bad for me as an outcome, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. Because in a lesser movie, I think it could have been done where, like, oh, look, the mystery's been solved, and like now they go back to like their happy life or whatever. But not in this one.
No one gets out of this movie unscathed. Absolutely, yeah. Even the one character that kind of gets away, yeah, she's traumatized for life. There's just no doubt about it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what else we can talk about here without getting into the storyline. Just like I said, great performances, a beautiful dual role by Carolyn Bracken. Definitely someone to look out for. Also, what the fuck with this husband? Am I the only one that thought his wife was way more attractive than the woman he was cheating with? Like, yeah, she's younger. Yes, she's younger. I'll give you that. But a few wrinkles on a woman's face does not suddenly make her unattractive. Like, I thought his wife was way more attractive than this, 20-whatever-year-old blonde that he's suddenly with. Just, man, some men. Age is just a number, my friends, I assure you. Anyway, I guess with that, let's go ahead and give our final spoiler warning. If you have not seen Oddity yet, and unfortunately, if you haven't seen Oddity yet, you might be waiting a couple of months if you can't find a screening in theaters. But if you didn't get a chance to see Oddity this weekend, then like I said, I would say pause the show, wait for it. Because, I mean, like I said, I don't want to spoil anything about this movie. These are the types of movies that I'm glad I don't watch trailers for. Going into this movie and knowing nothing at all about it, I just feel like it added some of that dread, some of that, because I have no idea what other characters are getting introduced because I didn't see the trailer. I'm not sure where the movie's going, again, because I didn't see the trailer. And I did watch the trailer after the film, as I always do before I review a film. And this trailer actually does do a really good job of kind of hiding the mystery, hiding the fact that some people are, more nefarious than others, things like that. So a good trailer all around. So, but yeah, so happy to go into this one as blind as possible because I had an absolute blast with it. I'm not going to call this a fun movie. This is not a fun, quote unquote, horror movie by any stretch of the imagination. But it's, like I said, very unnerving, very off-putting. It's an hour and 38 minutes, so it's a quick watch. You're not going to be stuck in the theater for 3 hours by any stretch. I just, like I said, I can't recommend it enough. So there you go, folks. Your final spoiler warning, excuse me. English is not my strong suit today. Let's get into our walkthrough. Okay. So our movie opens up just like the trailer opens up, where we see Danny Timmis basically moving into her house. And like I said, folks, I tried to describe the house earlier. It's got like a horseshoe shape, like a squared off horseshoe, where it's got like an arch for a driveway, and then it's like a big open space. And like I said, it looks kind of like a motel where all the rooms are kind of around the outer edge of the property. So it's kind of an interesting house. Definitely not a house that I would be against living in, though if serial killers are going to visit often, maybe I won't so much. So Danny is home. She's moving in. It's her first night in her home. She is married to Dr. Ted Timmis, who is a psychiatrist, like a head psychiatrist at a mental facility in the area. And he works nights. So she's home alone. And she's staying in a tent because it seems like the heat hasn't been turned on in the house. The furniture hasn't arrived. She's literally just like in the main room in a tent. And on her first night, she gets a knock on the, well, not even a knock on the door. She hears someone walking outside her front door. She walks up and there's like a little window, like with a flap that you could slide across, much bigger than a peephole, basically. She opens it up and boom, there's a guy standing there who's wearing one glass eye. So his glass eye, which is a completely different color than his real eye, is just very off-putting. I can see how a woman, especially, a fairly small, English woman, or English or Irish, I think Irish actually, Irish woman, staying in this house by herself in the middle of nowhere. I mean, she's not near a town that I know of. Anyway, The person outside the door, the guy with the glass eye, basically asks if he could be let in. She asks why. He says, I saw someone go into your house. There's someone in your house. When you went out to the car just now, you left the front door open, and I saw someone slip into your house. Now, obviously, that sounds like BS for most logical people. It sounds like this crazy guy is just trying to get access into this house. She then says, they have kind of a funny interaction where she starts calling out, "Hello, is anyone in my house?" And the guy, who turns out his name is Olin. We find out later in the film his name is Olin. Olin basically says he's not going to answer you, like he's frustrated with her. And then finally, it seems like she thinks that she's hearing creaking inside of the house. Obviously, she's getting freaked out. So she goes ahead and approaches the door and asks him, well, if I let you in, what are you going to do? He says, I just want to look around. I'm going to look around. And if I don't find anything, I'll leave you alone. It's that simple. And she goes to reach for the door lock, and the screen goes to black, and we get our title card. So that's the end of our cold open. When the movie comes back up, it is now a year later. We find out that Danny Timmis actually was murdered that day, and that Olin Boll was basically accused, tried, and convicted of the crime, and he is now staying in a mental facility. Olin Boll has an interesting past where he actually killed his mother. He beat his mother to death. Later in the film, we find out that he actually had good cause, because his mother was the one who actually blinded him in that one eye, and she was literally going after the other. She was basically a very abusive woman, vindictive, brutal woman, and he basically was defending himself. But of course, once she's dead, it's his word against a corpse. So of course, he gets sent to a mental facility. He ends up being deemed sane, and they let him out. Unfortunately, they let him out on this exact day that Danny Timmis is murdered. And like I said, for some reason, he shows up at her house, sees someone slip into her house, supposedly at this point, and, she ends up dead. So, of course, the police investigation is pretty cut and dry. Olin Boll did it. So, after this, we're more closely introduced to Ted Timmons. We see that he has an orderly named Ivan, a big menacing looking guy, and they seem to be kind of friends, but not really. Like, they have a really weird aesthetic when they're together. It almost seems like they're being antagonistic, but they're not. And we'll find out later on why they're not. That evening, Ted goes to a oddities and collectibles shop that is actually run by Darcy, and Darcy is the twin sister of Danny. And like I said, my friends, she is so much different than her sister that I didn't even realize it was the same actress. I knew that they had similar faces, but it just didn't dawn on me on first watch anyway that it was the same actress. So yeah, we're introduced to Darcy at this point. Darcy is the owner of this collectible shop. She is, of course, blind. And she's very happy to see Ted at first, because he is bringing her something. And what did he bring her? He actually brings her the glass eye, Olin Boll's glass eye. How did he get Olin Boll's black glass eye? Well, as it turns out, we see a flashback scene where the night before, Olin Boll was actually killed by someone or something in the mental facility. We see another patient at the mental facility named Declan, who we see multiple times throughout the film. He's actually the one who finds Olin Boll's body. And his body is just completely covered in blood. The head on first watch looked like somebody shot it with a fucking double barrel shotgun. But then on second watch, I started to realize that no, it looks like somebody just went crazy on his face, basically tore chunks off of his face and just threw them all over the room. Now, we will find out later what happened to Olin Boll, but for now, it's kind of a mystery. We don't, Olin just ended up dead. So, with that, back at the oddity shop, we find out from Darcy that she can read objects, that she can literally read, like she can hold an object, like a personal item, a ring, a watch, something that's actually had skin, that's actually touched the skin of the person in question. She can hold it, and she gives Ted an example while she's in the store. She talks about how, somebody brought her a wedding ring. She was able to read it. Or, yeah. I mean, I think this story is actually told later in the movie. I might be out of order. But anyway, I'm just trying to convey her abilities. She was able to hold someone's wedding ring, and she could tell if the guy had cheated on his wife. And as it turns out, yes, the guy had cheated many times for many, many years on his wife. So, his wife gets that kind of sense of closure after the death of her husband. So, like I said, she can hold personal objects and see things about them. At the same time, when Ted walks into the shop, she's holding one of those desk bells, one of those service bells that you would see at the front desk of a hotel, one of those little dinging desk bells. She's holding it and staring at it intently. Eventually, the conversation goes back to that bell, and Ted's like, "What's up with this bell?" She explains that this bell is haunted, and what happened was that a bellboy was called by someone at the desk using that exact bell, and he was helping bring the bags of a very drunk rich man up to his room in the hotel. They don't imply that the rich man did this on purpose or if it was an accident because he was drunk, but basically what happened is the man ends up pushing the bellboy, and he ends up falling down the stairs and breaking his neck and dying instantly. Now, 2 days later, the next time that someone rang that bell at the hotel, they were expecting the new bellboy to show up. But what comes running at them? The spirit of the dead bellboy. So now it has been established that anybody who rings this bell is going to be killed by this bellboy, hence its curse. And during this conversation, she also does explain that all the items in her store are cursed. Sounds familiar, huh, Mike? A store with cursed items. What's that like?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking of that too, and I was like, should I bring that up in my journal? Like, I thought maybe it was too much of like a spoiler element to say a cursed item shop, so I didn't bring it up.
No, it's valid. So yeah, of course, for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, of course, Michael and I are also on a show called the Crystal Lake Gift Shop, where we do an episode-by-episode retrospective of the original Friday the 13th television series. And for those of you who actually remember the Friday the 13th television series, you remember that it has nothing to do with Jason Voorhees, but it has to do with a shop of cursed objects that they are now going around, that the members of this store are now going around and collecting to bring back to the store, put it in a vault so that it's safe and that it can't hurt people anymore. So yeah, as soon as she said all the objects in the store are cursed, instantly I'm like, hey, Curious Goods. We're at Curious Goods. That's awesome. So anyway, like I said, after she gets the explanation, or after she gives the explanation of this desk bell, and that is a MacGuffin for later, so keep that in the back of your head. She grabs the glass eye from Ted. She sees Ted out. They have some pleasantries where Darcy says, "Oh, next week marks a year, since Danny was murdered, and I would love to visit you. I'd love to see you, and I just feel like talking about my sister, since it's been a year." Ted says yes, but that he probably won't be able to do it on the anniversary, which is the following week. But he says, he basically says, call me and we'll set something up. We'll figure out what's what. So after Ted leaves the store, she takes the glass eye into the back room. She puts her hand on it with no gloves on, just her bare hand, puts it on it, and she starts to see events as Olin Bowles saw them. Now, she doesn't show us a lot. Like I said, the information comes very slow in this movie, and I actually like it because of it. I see the benefit of having a big bombastic finale where all the information's given to us, but I also see the benefit in this style where we're getting little bits of information, and it just keeps, every time you get more information, it becomes more interesting and you're more invested. It's not like Watchers, that the movie that we recently reviewed, where once we got the information, we all lost interest because it was so goddamn stupid. This one, it feeds us information and it keeps us interested. So like I said, she holds Olin's glass eye. She sees a couple of events, like him sitting in his room, him knocking at the door that night, the night that she visits Danny. But then the visions stop and she just kind of pulls her hands off. That's when we're then introduced to, oh, no. At that point, we see her get upset about something. She's like, she gets really upset. She's like, what is going on? Like we as the viewer are wondering, because she lives alone and she's a blind woman and she doesn't talk to herself. So she doesn't have a outer monologue. So, but we see her get upset and she goes back to her shop and she's so like focused and pissed off that she literally throws open the front door, doesn't close it behind her, even though it's the middle of the night. It's not business hours. She throws her cane on the ground. Don't forget she's blind. And she walks back to the back room of her store. And this is where we see our famous bunny from Caveat. We actually see a wall of a bunch of like toys and stuffed animals. So maybe, who knows? Maybe one of those will be the MacGuffin for the third movie. Maybe it's like some ultra foreshadowing.
Yeah, because we even get that like shot where it kind of goes one by one of each item.
Exactly. So who knows? Maybe he's setting something up for the next one.
Maybe in the next few days, as more people have seen the movie, we'll get like a still shot of the shelf so we can analyze each one.
Oh, hell yeah. They'll do a Cabin in the Woods type meme. Absolutely. Where we can see everything, like with Cabin in the Woods, read everything on the whiteboard, blah, blah, blah. So yeah. So while she's back there is a wooden trunk that she has locked, and she ends up kneeling in front of the locked trunk, putting her hands on it, and it almost seems like she goes into a trance. Like she leans back and she closes her eyes and her head is pointed, like her face is pointed straight up to the ceiling. We hear the music kind of swell to a crescendo, and then the scene just ends. And then we are transported back to the house. And this is where we are introduced to Ted's new girlfriend. He alludes to having a new girlfriend when he visits Darcy, which I'm actually kind of surprised that he was so cavalier about giving this information out, that less than a year after his wife is dead, he not only is dating someone, she's moving in with them. So yeah, definitely red lights start to go off. And you could even see her mood in that scene when he tells her that he has a new girlfriend. Her kind of facial expression kind of changes, and she's more questioning of Ted's, motivations and everything. So anyway, like I said, we're back at the house. Ted, we get some scenes in between here and there where we actually see some of the patients at the mental hospital that Ted works at. And one patient in particular that we only see from behind, but we see him like 3 separate times in the movie. So they're setting him up for something. We just don't know what at this moment. And he's always chewing. He's got like a Hannibal Lecter style face mask on, like so to prevent him from biting people. And he's constantly masticating. Every time the doctor comes and looks at him from behind, it's like he's chewing on his own tongue or something. It's like really, really off-putting. So obviously this guy's probably some kind of freaky cannibal or whatever, but we'll learn more about him later on. So like I said, back at the house, what was her name? Iana. Iana is the name of the new girlfriend, Ted's new girlfriend. She basically is complaining to Ted because she doesn't like staying in that house alone at night, because don't forget, Ted works nights. And so she has to stay in that house alone at night, even though her, literally his ex-wife, or his wife technically, was murdered in that house, and he still expects her to stay there alone every night because he works nights. They make the decision that they're going to live at her apartment until Ted gets first shift, because he mentions that another doctor is going to be retiring soon and he'll be able to work first shift. While they're having their conversation about this, it turns out that a chest, a familiar wooden chest that we've already seen, has been delivered to Ted's house. It's the wooden chest that Darcy was kneeling in front of at her store. And Ted is like, well, what's in it? Iana doesn't know. She says it's locked, but then she hears a car outside and a car door close. She opens the little, window to look through the door and sees that it's Darcy. And she's like, well, you can ask her yourself what's in the box, because Darcy's here. Ted starts to freak out because he's like, what's going on? I didn't invite her over here. So he ends up inviting her in, giving her, a tour of the front room at least, which obviously she's blind, so it's not much of a tour. It's more like a holding her hand while he guides her through the house so she gets a lay of the land. And she talks about how, oh, don't you remember? You invited me over. You told me to come over on her 1-year anniversary. Now, folks, the previous scene in the store only occurred like 5 minutes earlier. We know that Ted didn't invite her over there. We know for a fact that Ted said, we'll contact each other and try to pick a day to get together. But she decides to just show up there. Ted, being the polite man that he is, says, the polite Irish man that he is, basically is like, oh, okay, I must have made a mistake. I'm very sorry, but I'm actually on my way out the door right now. And then Iana is not planning on staying here tonight. She's going back to her apartment in the city. And Darcy is like, okay, that's fine. Can I stay? Like, Darcy's very matter of fact about everything. She asks Ted if he can call in sick, and he's like, no, I'm sorry, I can't. He at one point he asks Iana if she can make her something to eat. As Iana is literally walking out the door, she's like, can you make me something to eat? I'm kind of hungry. Like, she's very matter of fact about everything. She's being, I wouldn't say rude, but she's being very short with everyone. And, later we're going to find out that there's a reason for that. Eventually, Iana is like, okay, I've done everything I can. I'm going to pack up my stuff and get out of here now. But she can't find her keys, her car keys. And her car is outside, and, she's just looking for her keys. Keys are nowhere to be found. Now, obviously, as the viewer of a horror movie, the first thing I thought is that Darcy took the keys. Darcy probably took your keys because she wants you to stay there for some reason. She knows something that the audience doesn't yet. As it turns out, it wasn't actually Darcy, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And at this moment, too, they also open the wood chest. I'm sorry. Before Ted leaves, they open the wood chest to show what's inside. At this moment, we as the audience don't get to see what's in the chest, but as she's closing the door, we see a wooden hand inside of it. So it definitely looks like some kind of wooden statue. Ted doesn't like it. Iana doesn't like it. Basically, Darcy explains to Iana that the 5th wedding anniversary is the wood anniversary. It's traditional to give somebody celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary something made of wood. Well, Iana instantly gets bitchy and is like, well, we're not married yet. And we haven't been together 5 years, so I'm not sure why you decided to give us this. And, Darcy's like, oh, don't you like it? And Iana's very honest. I'll give Iana credit for that. She's a little bitchy, but she's honest. And she flat out says, no, I hate this thing. It's very unnerving. Why did you bring this to my house? And she kind of just, Darcy ends up just kind of smiling and turning around, leaving it alone. So eventually, after I don't know, probably like 5 to 10 minutes of Iana looking for her keys, she just gives up. She's like, well, it looks like I'm staying here tonight. I'm not going anywhere without my keys. Then Iana puts together like a little charcuterie board of sandwiches and crackers, sandwich stuff and cracker stuff to give to her to eat. She doesn't even end up eating any of it. She literally just paws. Don't forget, she's blind. So she literally, with her hand, she just kind of paws over all the food, making sure to touch every single thing on the plate, and then decides, nah, I'm not hungry. So I'm loving Darcy at this point. Absolutely loving her. So eventually Darcy ends up falling asleep on the couch, and Iana is walking around the house. Now she's upstairs right up. I forgot to mention that after Ted leaves and Iana goes on her hunt for her keys, somehow the wooden man goes from inside the box to sitting at the dinner table. He's literally sitting at the dinner table, his arms on the table, spread out in front of him, with a silent scream face, on him, gaping mouth open, eyes angry looking. I mean, it looks like it's screaming at you, literally. At this point, actually, I skipped a scene, a fairly important scene. Basically, there's a scene where Iana and Darcy are sitting at the table with the wooden man, and this is where Darcy explains to Iana what she can do, that she can touch personal items and blah, blah, blah. And then she starts to talk about, basically, Darcy asks Iana, would you have let Olin Bowl in that night? And she's like, of course not. Do I look like an idiot? And she's like, and then Darcy Darcy replies with, well, do I look like an idiot? Because you sound like an idiot, which is probably the funniest line in the whole goddamn movie. The whole theater went crazy when she said, you sound like an idiot. I lost it too. On all 3 viewings, I lost it every time. I fucking love it. So basically she goes, well, do I look like an idiot? And Iana goes, no. And Darcy says, well, my sister and I are twins, so she looks exactly like me. So are you saying that she was an idiot? And she's like, no, of course not. And Darcy's kind of getting upset because it seems like Iana is implying that Danny was an idiot. But then this is where Darcy starts to reveal some information. This is where Darcy says, nope, Olin Boll did not kill my sister. And she's like, and Iana's like, well, what are you talking about? It was investigated. He was tried. He was convicted. Like, everything says that he did it. And she's like, no, Olin Boll did not kill my sister. And then it seems like she's about to start explaining what's going on, and the camera cuts away. So we don't actually get to hear the rest of that story. What we get instead is Iana eventually waiting for Darcy to fall asleep at the table, which she does. Then she calls Ted on her cell phone, and this is where we start to get information. She basically tells Ted that, Ted's surprised that she's still at the house because, Ted thought she was leaving. She explains that she can't find her keys, blah, blah, blah. And then she starts talking about, well, I just had an interesting conversation with Darcy. Darcy says that Olin Boll did not kill your sister. She says that an orderly named Ivan killed him. And you could see the look on Ted's face instantly change, like that guilty look on his face, like, oh shit, what do you mean Ivan killed my wife? And she's like, yeah, that's what she's saying. She's saying that Ivan, the orderly, came here and killed your wife. Why would she be saying that? Now, of course, Ted is a logical, scientific kind of guy, so instantly he's like, well. And we do find out earlier in the film that Darcy did have brain cancer earlier in her life. She doesn't anymore. She's cancer-free now. But that potentially could have been what led to her blindness. A tumor in your head could potentially affect your optical nerves, blah, blah, blah. So obviously Ted's like, well, Darcy's obviously fucked up. There's something wrong with her. So here's what you're going to do. Just say goodnight to her, go to bed, go to your bed, go to the bedroom, lock the door, and just wait for me to come home in the morning. She does that. She ends up doing that. Now, I did forget to mention that multiple times throughout the movie, Iana thinks that she sees Danny's ghost in the house, either in a picture that was taken, a couple of days earlier, or in one scene where she turns off the hall light, hears someone breathing behind her, and then turns around and sees the image of Danny standing at her window. So, she's freaked out. She goes into the bedroom. Earlier in the film, she found a camera that Danny had been using to take pictures because I guess Darcy had suggested to Danny that she take a camera, set it up, and have it take pictures like every 5 seconds or something, like in 5-second intervals, and see if the camera ever caught anything like spirits. Because Darcy was so convinced that this house is so old, there has to be some ghosts there. As it turns out, no ghosts, other than the one who was killed there a year ago. So after Iana says goodnight to Darcy, she goes up to her bedroom. She starts flipping through the camera, looking at videos. She ends up watching a video from their first night in the house, from, Ted and Danny's first night in the house. She watches the whole video, but then for some reason she gets into bed, gets comfortable, turns off the bedroom lights, and she starts that video over again. This time on the second watch, when the camera pans over to Ted, it's not Ted, it's Danny, a dead version of Danny, sunken in eyes, the flesh looking gray and everything, which, is one of our first real jump scares of the movie. There's only like 3 or 4 true jump scares in this movie, which is one of the things I appreciate. But the ones that they do are actually effective. So, fewer is better. So after the jump scare, she throws the camera on the ground and starts freaking out. She turns on the bedroom light, and suddenly the camera starts taking pictures again on its own. It just starts, you start hearing it click, taking pictures. So Iana picks up the camera and looks at the screen, the LED screen, and sees that there's an image of Danny's ghostly face in the camera. She ends up, what happens is the camera ends up panning up from that shot, and there's Danny in the corner of the bedroom telling Iana to run, just saying, run. And of course, Iana, being, a young woman, freaks right the fuck out, runs out of the house, basically goes downstairs. Well, she doesn't actually run out of the house. She runs downstairs to the main room where Darcy and the wooden man are still sitting. Darcy's still asleep at the table. And she tries to wake up Darcy unsuccessfully, but then she hears a noise behind her coming out of the wooden chest. Now, there's nothing in the wooden chest because the wooden man is sitting at the table. But like I said, she hears something in there, and she slowly creeps up to it. Obviously, we're all expecting another jump scare, but she opens the chest, and what's inside the chest? Her fucking keys. Yes, Danny, the ghost of Danny, helped Iana escape this house, which I kind of like because there's going to be some information that we find out later about Iana that maybe doesn't make her the nicest person in the world. So, after she finds her keys, she just books it out of the house, doesn't even close the door behind her, walks right out the front door, gets in her car, and gets the fuck out of there. And that's the last time that we see Iana. Now, at the exact moment that Iana is leaving, well, maybe not the exact moment because they would have seen each other, but very shortly after Iana leaves, Ted comes back. Dr. Timmis is back. Because he's worried about the conversation that he just had with Iana about Ivan the orderly. So he walks into the house, all the lights are off, so he grabs a lantern from the car, and he starts walking around the house, looking around, wondering, where everybody is, because obviously Iana's car is gone. And none of the lights are on in the house. So, maybe he's thinking, she found her keys and they decided to go somewhere or whatever the case may be. What ends up happening is he ends up finding Darcy sitting in the dark, kneeling on the ground, crying, basically mildly crying, not like sobbing out loud, but crying. And she walks up and Dr. Timmis walks up to her and says, Darcy, are you okay? Darcy says, I know. And he's like, what do you know? And he's like, did you tell Iana that Ivan killed my wife? And she's like, yes, because that's what happened. And he's like, well, why do you think that Ivan killed my wife? And this is where we get the next revelation. She basically picks up her head and says, because you told him to. And at that exact moment, we get a flashback scene where, yes, it turns out that Ted Timmis actually, I don't want to say paid because we never see any kind of money exchange, but basically, yes, they plotted to kill Danny. So Ivan is the one who visited the house. And I also forgot to mention that we do eventually get to see more of what happened that night. We see that eventually she decides not to let Olin Bowl in, and says, no, I'm not going to let you in. Olin decides to go to town to get the police to come back because he's still convinced that he saw somebody walk into the house. Eventually, Danny starts looking through the pictures on the camera. Don't forget the camera that she set up to try to find ghosts. And she ends up finding an image of a stranger in her house on the camera, which is another one of the effective jump scares that we get in the movie. So at that moment, she realizes, holy shit, that creepy guy was right. There's somebody in my fucking house. Because the guy in the image is not Olin Bowl. It's somebody much taller wearing a mask. So eventually we find out what happened. She goes into her tent to look through the camera, finds that picture of the stranger, opens up the tent. Why she's zipping the tent open and closed in her own house is beyond me. I guess it's just for heating issues because the heat's not turned on in the house yet. But then she opens up the door and the flap of the tent. And this, in my opinion, is the most effective jump scare in the movie. She's looking into the darkness, and what we hear is wood creaking in the distance, almost like, 10, 12 feet ahead of the tent in a darkened hallway that somebody might be in there walking. So the camera literally starts to very slowly zoom towards the darkness, and then bam, a fucking guy shows up from the side of the tent and literally sticks his head right into the camera, and we see that he's wearing that very creepy mask that we saw earlier in the movie. The mask isn't ultra vital. I mean, we only see it twice. Once during a flashback with Olin Bowl, and then right now during this flashback of the actual murder. We see that Ivan, in the mask, grabs a hammer. We don't actually get to see it, but I do like the way they edited it, because what they did was we see a shot from the side where Ivan is on the right side of the screen, the tent is on the left side of the screen, and there's a lantern on inside of the tent, so we can see the shadow of Danny in there. And he's just for maybe 5 to 10 seconds just kind of staring at her while holding the hammer. Then suddenly he gets up, walks into the tent. We hear a single scream, and then instantly the movie cuts to after the murder, where the shot hasn't changed. Ivan is still on the far right, but now the tent is bloody. There's blood all over the inside of the tent, and it's visible from the outside of the tent, like I said, because of the lantern that's inside. So the way that they shot that, I thought was actually really, really nice. So yeah, there it is, folks. Dr. Timmis has Ivan kill his wife. Why does he have Ivan kill his wife? Because this dumb piece of shit is so full of himself, he literally says, oh, she would never get over me. And she would never get over me. And then if she found out about me and Iana, I would never get to keep the house. And boom, that's where we find out something that we've all suspected throughout the movie anyway, that yes, Dr. Timmis was unfaithful to his wife for probably almost a year before the death of his wife. So there you go, folks. It's just a plot to get rid of the wife so that he can have the house. Now, back to the scene at hand.
Yeah,
back to the house. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say the other element I like about this that kind of reminded me of like the Hammer style horror. I hate that I keep harping on it, but it just really just kind of connected with me that way. Is it almost, the way the movie depicts it, it's like the actual guy who did the murdering isn't even the most evil person in the movie. Right. It's the goddamn doctor who orchestrated and kind of manipulated. Because I think there was a scene, and granted, I only seen it once, you've seen it 3 times, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels like he's kind of leaning on him, knowing that the orderly guy has like a history of like other crimes. They don't get into details about like his past, but he kind of alludes to like almost like, hey, if you don't go along with this, I could make like trouble for you because I know about your history. So it's like a lot of times in the old school horror, it's like, yes, you have the brute who's obviously a bad person for like committing the crimes, but then you still have like the mastermind behind it all. And this one, it kind of followed that script where it's like the mastermind pulling the strings is the one with the real power. So I like that element too.
Yeah.
Because even the brute was trying to kind of talk him out of it. Like, why don't you just wait for a divorce, dude? Like, you this can still end like with no actual crime happening.
Exactly, which is it just shows the hubris of the doctor, that he actually thought that his wife was so in love with him that she would never be able to get over him. It's just that douchebag mentality that he's, God's gift to women because he's a handsome doctor. Oh, well. Anyway. But yeah, Mike, you are correct. I mean, that conversation actually happens later in the film where the doctor's talking about Ivan's past crimes and everything. So we don't find out about that stuff until later after Ivan's in the hospital. But let's get to that. So we're back. We're still back at the house. At this point, Darcy has revealed everything that she knows. Ted is still playing dumb, trying to pretend that, your brain cancer must be back and it's affecting your thinking and blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we as the viewers know that Darcy is 100% correct. And basically Ted says, okay, well, I have to go back to work, but I'm going to leave my cell phone here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to call the inspector, the lead inspector on his wife's murder case. He is going to explain to you all of the facts and why Olin Boll is 100% guilty. So he leaves his phone on a banister and leaves the house. Now, what Darcy doesn't know is that the doctor removed a trap door for a hole in the floor that we see Danny during the open of the movie. We actually see her fixing the hole, like putting a piece of wood over the trap. It's not really a trap door. It's just like a hole in the floor. And she puts a board over it that matches the rest of the floor, so it looks halfway decent. What we don't realize is that during the conversation that Darcy and Dr. Timmis were having, where she exposes him for everything that he's done, he removed the covering on that hole and then strategically placed his phone on the banister directly between, or should I say, so that the hole in the floor was exactly between the phone on the banister and where Darcy was sitting. So he ends up leaving the house, drives back to his office, and then calls, or well, should I say, eventually the cell phone does ring and Darcy's there by herself. This is when the camera pans back to show that the trap door is gone and that the hole is exposed. Don't forget, Darcy's blind. The whole time that the phone is ringing and Darcy is sitting there contemplating whether to pick it up, whether to walk over to the phone and get it, I'm praying that she doesn't get up and stand on her feet. I'm hoping that she'll crawl on all four so that she might potentially hit the hole with one of her hands and not, fall through. Unfortunately, that does not happen. The plan goes exactly as Dr. Timmis thought. She gets up to answer the phone call. As it turns out, it's not the police inspector. It's just him back at his office calling his own phone, hoping that she falls through the hole. So she ends up falling through the hole, hitting the floor very hard, and then passing out. A couple of minutes later, Ivan shows up. Just Ivan, not Dr. Timmis. Ivan shows up, and he starts walking around the house. He sees the wooden man at the door. Or at the table, he sees the wooden man at the coffee table, but he doesn't really make much issue of it. Eventually, he walks through the house until he gets to Darcy, and yes, we see that Darcy is in very bad shape. The back of her head, she's laying flat on the ground. One of her legs is bent back in an improper way, and her head is bleeding profusely. There's a pool of blood underneath her head. But then Ivan makes a phone call, basically calls Dr. Timmis, and they're using code, which is actually kind of genius. Literally, Ivan says, "I found your phone. It looks like it's broken." And Dr. Timmis is like, "Can it be repaired?" And or he says, "Is it still working?" And Ivan says, "Well, it's still working, but I don't think it's going to make it. It looks like it's on its last legs." And they're literally talking about Darcy like she's a phone, which, again, that's the criminal mind at work. You never want to admit anything on an open phone line. So, yeah. So eventually, Ivan walks up to Darcy, who's on the ground dying, and basically says, "Don't worry, honey. It's almost over. It's going to end soon." Ivan starts to walk away. Then we see Darcy lift up her hand, put her hand in like almost like a cone shape, and then put it over her heart. And we start hearing like moaning and distant screams. And the sound design in this movie is fucking stellar. But in this scene especially, it's spectacular. We hear those moans and distant screams, and her eyes are open and she's staring up, and we hear that she's saying something. She's chanting something, but we can't really tell. You can't really discern any words that she's saying. And Ivan hears this and basically starts to go back to where Darcy is to see what's going on. And then when he goes back there, the wooden man is gone. The wooden man is not sitting at the table where it was just 2 minutes earlier. He starts to freak out. Where the hell is this thing? And then suddenly he looks up at the front door, and there's something there blocking the front door, blocking the only exit to this house. And he lifts up his flashlight, and it's the wooden man. The wooden man is standing motionless, mind you. He's not moving, but he's just standing there in front of the door. But then suddenly the man moves his head. The wooden man moves his head like he's staring at Ivan. Ivan freaks out, drops his flashlight, goes running back up the stairs, and then we see the wooden man start to give chase. And the wooden man is just walking, he's doing his best Jason Voorhees impression, not running, just taking his sweet time. Ivan eventually gets back up to the top where the hole in the floor was that Darcy fell through. So, of course, I was hoping he would fall through it too, but then that would hurt Darcy even more, who's right under the hole. So, but what ends up happening is he realizes that he's trapped, that stairway is the only way back downstairs. So what he decides to do is he decides to just jump from the the guardrail up top that's right above the dinner table. By the way, why the hell wouldn't he just jump on the dinner table? This idiot decides to jump on the side of the dinner table, making his fall an extra 4 feet long? Which of course breaks his ankle. He lands on the ground. You hear the crack, and like I said, it's so dark you're not 100% sure what you're looking at. We do see that his ankle is injured, but it's a quick shot, like literally less than a second, just a quick shot of his ankle. We'll see some red coming out of it, and that's it. So he's stuck on the ground, and the wooden man is just coming back down the stairs nonchalantly, just kind of walking. Eventually, he walks up to Ivan, literally picks him up by the head off the ground, and it looks like the wooden man is about to start to squeeze. It's to basically pop Ivan's fucking head like a cherry. What ends up happening, though, is that the camera goes back to Darcy periodically, and we can actually hear Darcy's heartbeat, and we hear that her heartbeat's getting slower and weaker. And eventually Darcy does succumb to death. Her hand falls. The instant that her hand falls, the wooden man goes limp and drops Ivan. But at that moment, we think Ivan is dead because Ivan's on the ground, not moving. The wooden man is just standing there motionless, and Darcy is dead on the ground. So after this scene, it's the next morning, and we're back at the mental facility, and Ivan is in a hospital bed at the facility, and he's strapped in, and he doesn't understand what's going on. When he wakes up, there's Dr. Timmis standing right there at the foot of his bed, basically asking him, so what happened? And Ivan at first lies. At first he says, I was attacked. It was dark. I didn't see who it was, but someone attacked me. And then Dr. Timmis says, well, that's funny because when you were first brought in, you told the nurse that you were attacked by a wooden man. And then Ivan is like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Fuck it. That is what happened. A wooden man came to life and attacked me. Now, of course, Dr. Timmis doesn't believe any of this shit. Again, Mr. Logical and Mr. Scientific doesn't believe in anything supernatural. So then he tells Ivan, oh, the nurse also told me one other thing. You asked to see a priest and told her not to tell me that. Why do you want to see a priest? Why would you, someone like you, who's committed, all these crimes, why would you call a priest? And then Ivan just admits, because I want to confess. And the doctor, you could see the doctor's face get really stern. He's getting angry. He's like, confess to what exactly? Because, with your history, you've committed so many crimes in your past. What exactly are you going to confess to? And Ivan's like, I'm going to confess to all of it. All of it. I can't deal with this guilt. And the doctor, Dr. Timmis, basically says, if you tell a priest, if you confess your crimes to a priest, he's either going to try to convince you to go to the police, or he's going to call the police himself, and you're going to get arrested. And Ivan's like, oh, don't worry. I'm not going to say anything about you. I'll tell them that I killed your wife because I wanted to. And the doctor's like, well, that's not going to work for me, you see, because you work here. You were here under my employ. And if people find out that I had a psychotic murderer working for me, it's going to bring my judgment into question. People are going to think that I'm not a very good psychiatric doctor. So, and then literally, as he's about to walk out of the room, with Ivan strapped to the bed, he literally says, you know what's one of the great things about working in a mental facility is that when one patient kills another, there's never really any questions. You know, no one's ever wondering what really happened. The police barely do any kind of investigation because it's just one crazy person killing another. Did that light a light in your head, folks? Think back to Olin Bowl, the fact that he died mysteriously. Yep, Dr. Timmis has been using a certain patient of his as an executioner for him. And what patient is it? It's fucking Hannibal Lecter. It's the guy in the face mask who's constantly chewing on something. So eventually what ends up happening is the door to Ivan's bedroom opens, but we don't see anyone at the door. So somebody obviously opened the door and crawled into the room. Eventually, Ivan looks up and sees this guy standing at the foot of his bed, staring at his feet. And the only thing that we get to see is the guy take a bite out of his foot, and then the camera cuts away, which, folks, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you're going to make a horror movie, you got to make the villain deaths more satisfying, you know? Like you showed me Darcy die in all of her glory, even though she's the most likable character in this fucking movie. But then the biggest piece of shit almost the biggest piece of shit in this movie, we don't even get to see him get his, just desserts. So it's a minor complaint, but I'm still going to make it.
Yeah. I just wanted to add on this kind of even, or just not the death part, but just the scenario of how the orderly ends up, locked down in the bed, and we kind of get the spiel from we get the back and forth because we know at this point kind of like, oh, they were on the same team or they had they conspired to make the plan, but to further hit home the point that the doctor is much more evil than the brute is. As soon as like anything related to this could get the doctor in trouble, he pretty much throws the brute under the table and is like, your use for me is done, so you could die just as easily now. And I kind of love it. Like, not on a practical, like, not, you know what I'm saying, story wise. I love it in
a good and evil sense. It's not something that we like, but it just shows again the calculating mind of this evil character, and that he's not just muscle like Ivan. Ivan is just muscle who does whatever he's told. This guy is the one who came up with the plan and everything else. How it shows like the evil nature of man can come in many different forms. You don't have to be the one that's actually like doing the killing. Exactly. All right, folks. So at this point, Ivan has been dispatched. And, oh, by the way, during this conversation, it's also the reason that the doctor is so skeptical of the wooden man thing is because he actually burned the wooden man. After Ivan and Darcy's dead body got taken out of the house, he basically took the wooden man, which was still there, lifeless, standing next to the dinner table, and just burned it. And he basically said, well, how could this thing be supernatural? If I burned it, it didn't struggle, it didn't scream, it didn't do anything, which, of course, makes Ivan look crazy in the eyes of the doctor, blah, blah, blah. But, of course, as the movie viewer, we know what's what. So at this point, we see the doctor driving home, back to the house. While he's driving back to the house, he's listening to a voicemail from Iana. And Iana is literally like, listen, don't call me anymore, okay? You're a weird guy. You live in a house where now 2 people have been killed, and you still want me to live in that house with you. You're a creep, and I want nothing to do with you. Don't ever call me again. And she hangs up. So despite the doctor getting away with murder, he still loses one of the things that he was trying to keep, which was his relationship. So he gets out of the car, he goes up to his front door, and he sees that there's a package there. There's a small box waiting for him. He picks it up, and he sees the return address is the Oddities and Collectibles shop that Darcy ran. But, of course, Darcy's now dead, so this had to have been sent to him earlier. He ends up opening the box. He goes into the house, opens the box. It's the bell. It's the bellhop bell from the story of the haunted bellhop from earlier. And like I said, when you watch the movie, that scene earlier when she's explaining to him what the bell does, he doesn't believe her in the slightest. He actually wants her to ring the bell. He's like, so if you ring the bell, what are we going to see? And she's like, well, I'm not going to find out because the last two people that rang this bell died. So she just puts the bell back in a box and puts it away. And now here is the bell sitting on his dinner table in front of him, and he's looking at it, and we get that scene where he's contemplating hitting the bell. He holds his hand over the bell. Is he going to do it? Is he going to not do it? He's hesitating. Then he pulls his hand away and starts looking around because he thinks he hears like creaking and shit like that. It's an old house. It's an old wooden and stone house, so it's going to be constantly creaking. Finally, he works up. He not that he works up the courage, but he basically laughs like to himself, like under his breath, and probably says to himself, "Why are you being so stupid? Just ring the damn bell." So finally, he rings it, a single ring, ding, and he looks around, and nothing's happening. Then he thinks he hears footsteps behind him, and he looks, and there's nothing behind him. Then the camera even does a POV shot of something behind the doctor walking up to him, and once again, he turns around and doesn't see anything. So finally, he laughs it off. You know, he just kind of has a laugh. The camera cuts away one more time, and when it cuts back, there is an undead bellhop standing right next to him, dressed in the classic bellhop outfit, but with a very decayed face. It almost looks like something out of Disney's Haunted Mansion, honestly. And then the camera cuts, and that's it. That's the end of your movie. So, like I said, even though we know he's not going to survive, that the bellhop's going to take care of him, it's one of those things where I want to see the villains get their comeuppance. I know this movie doesn't rely on gore, even though we do get, you know, Olin Bowles' death is pretty gory. Well, the aftermath anyway. We don't actually get to see his death, but the aftermath is pretty goddamn gory. And then, of course, Darcy falling on the ground and ending up in a pool of her own blood is pretty fucked up. But I figure since the movie is not relying on on-screen kills and gore, that's probably why it cut when it did, which is fine. Like I said, the story is over. It's not like there's more story to tell. Everyone is dead. Literally, the only person who survived is Iana, and she's probably going to be traumatized for the rest of her life, because I didn't even go over everything that she saw. Yeah, she saw Danny multiple times in the house. Even as she was walking out of the house, she walks out of the house, turns around, and looks back one more time, and again sees Danny's ghostly face in the doorway telling her to run, telling her to get out of there. So it's kind of interesting. It kind of shows what a good person Danny was, because even though Danny in death knows that her husband was cheating on her, she still didn't want Iana to die, because she understands that if Iana stays in that house, Ivan is going to eventually kill her too. So she's like, get out, just leave.
Well,
so yeah, I like that.
Even her sister even made like a small, or she said a small quip about that, right? Too. She's like, my sister.
Yeah, she said Danny scared her away. No, yeah, because Ted asks where's Iana, and she just says, "Oh, Danny scared her away."
Yeah, and I think she said something like, not so much that, oh, she's more forgiving than me, but something along those lines, like
more level-headed or something. Like she was always the better or something along those
because
lines.
while we by this point in the movie, you know, it's pretty clear they were having an affair. We have no idea like how it went down, what he told her. So like while she's not completely innocent because that's who he was having an affair with, who knows what he told her. He you know, he could have been like, oh, we're getting separated. So it's almost okay, you're in the wrong, but it shouldn't cost you your life, so just get the hell out of here.
Exactly. I mean, infidelity should not be a reason for murder. I mean, obviously we all know from history that infidelity is a catalyst for murder, but Danny is smart enough to know that, yes, you were fucking my husband, but that doesn't mean you deserve to get, you know, butchered with a hammer by this fucking orderly. So get the hell out of here. So yeah, I like Danny even more by the end of the movie. And yeah, like I said, no one survives the movie other than Iana, and that is Oddity 2024. Folks, if you're still with us and you didn't watch the movie, why the fuck did you listen to this walkthrough? You should be watching the movie as blind as possible. But if you have seen the movie, let us know what you thought. Hit us up on the socials and tell us if we're wrong. Tell us if you agree with us. It seems like most of the preliminary reviews I'm seeing are all positive, though I have watched one YouTube video where the guy didn't like the movie. He actually said that the movie poster was the best part of the movie. If I could leap through the television and slap someone in the mouth, it would have been right there at that moment. Because how the fuck do you watch this movie and say it's not good?
Yeah.
And I didn't listen to the rest of the review. Once he said it was bad, like once he said the best part of the movie was the poster, I turned off the video. I didn't want to hear anymore. But yeah, some people, man.
Yeah, I'd almost be interested to see, because I guess the only well, I mean, I'm biased because I really like the movie, but
Exactly.
the only thing I could think of is maybe someone would make the argument that, like, well, behind all the bells and whistles, it was too simple of a story for me. But even that, I would be like, that doesn't make it not a good movie to me.
Yeah, I can't.
But I'm just trying to think of what someone would say.
That just feels like it's clawing its straws, trying to find something to crap on about.
It's a cop-out, absolutely. Sounds like a total cop-out. Like I said, I didn't watch the rest of the video because I wasn't interested. But you should be able to find it on YouTube, because I think the title of the video is poster is the best part or something like that. So it shouldn't be too hard to find. But yeah, I don't understand, like, what movies. I mean, this guy probably loved Night Swim.
No,
oh, man, I hope the hell not.
Exactly.
Thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
And yeah, I know in the write-up that I saw, one of the reviews, it mentioned, it's a wide limited, and it said it'll be on Shudder later this year, but I don't remember them having an actual date. So
No.
September something.
Yeah, one source said fall, and then another source said September. So that seems to be what's.
September's the one I have because it's screening at Fantasia, and
perfect.
They were supposed to have given it to me, but there's been this big brouhaha about third-party releases this year for Fantasia. Apparently, a couple of the reviewers ended up getting a little too clingy and demanding with demanding screeners.
Oh,
so they're really getting kind of they're like not handing them out. But they were saying that there was that it was one of the films that's supposed to be screening in September, but I don't remember the dates, and I think it'd be too much work to go through my emails trying to find it.
Yeah. No, that seems valid. It's always a few people that got to ruin everything for us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up our discussion on Oddity. We're 3 for 3 on here. Go see it if you get a chance by the time you listen to this. If not, mark down the date it hits Shudder, because it's.
Yeah, you'll get notices, because it'll probably be September, so it'll be available on pretty much all the groups everywhere on Facebook.
Yeah, we'll let you know too here. As soon as we get a solid date, we'll let you know.
All right, cool. Yep. Well, with that, Venom, do you have anything else out people should be listening to?
Nothing new since the last time. Like I said, like I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, Crystal Lake Gift Shop episode 5 is now available, where we looked at the Halloween episode from season 1 of Friday the 13th, the series. The latest episode of Creature Comforts is still episode 27, where we looked at the Nest. Next episode, I'm hoping, will be recorded this weekend sometime. We have already selected our movie. We're going to be going back to Universal, to the classic era of Universal Monsters, but I'm still going to keep the movie under my hat for now. So hopefully, like I said, we get that recorded sooner than later. And then the main show. We finally got our latest episode of the main show recorded. I'm sure Mike is in the process of editing that now, so hopefully that'll be out later this week, where we had a guest star, Miss Lacey Liu, came on to discuss Demons and Demons 2. One of the first times since our very first episode that we're actually doing like 2 movies in the same franchise in the same episode. So definitely, maybe not a first, but a second for No More Room in Hell episode. What are we up to? Like 61 or 62?
Yeah, that would have been 61. Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so check that out. And then that's it for me. No guest spots to report. Just trying to get a job. That's about it for me.
Yeah, I think technically we have about 70 episodes total. I just don't number our commentary specials in with
Yeah.
like the regular ones.
Absolutely.
All right, Dawn, how about you?
Yeah. As mentioned, Creature Comforts is coming. Should be coming soon. Looking forward to diving into that particular effort. Should be a lot of fun there. NFW, my Shark Week Spectacular series of commentaries, is still going strong. I think they've released 2 of them so far. We've recorded 4. I'm told there may be 1 more. We'll just leave those under wraps. So far, we've recorded it. We've released 2. First was Deep Blood, which was the 1990s Italian film by Joe D'Amato, and then we reviewed one from a couple of years ago called Maneater, which was a lot of fun. So those are available for you. And other than that, season 3 of Horror Countdown is available everywhere you find your podcasts. So go ahead and give that a listen before I ramp up for season 4 at the beginning of the year. So yeah, you got 6 more months of this before we start in again. So go ahead and give that a listen. But yeah, other than that, not much else.
All right, as far as I go, nothing outside the regular shows. The name of the game for me will be editing, not recording guest spots for the next couple days. So I'll be busy with that. And is there anything coming on the week of?
Yep.
What would it be?
We've got that. The Kit Harington werewolf movie, The Beast Within, opens on Friday.
Okay. Is that a wide release? I haven't
It's
seen
not
a lot
a
of
wide
advertising.
release. It is a very limited release. So I don't know that we're going to be able to lock it down. I'm just saying that's the only horror movie opening in theaters this week. So if I'm seeing showtimes here, but not at AMC, like not at multiplexes. Like I have to actually go to an independent theater to see it. But
okay.
if it's available for all of us, that'll probably be our movie before going back to the theater the following week to see the new M. Night Shyamalan movie Trap, which opens August 2nd. And that one obviously is going to be a wide release. No problem with that one.
So it's Trap, then it's Romulus, right? If I remember.
Romulus after that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I was trying to remember the order because I thought there was one where there was like a big double release weekend.
I was gonna ask for Romulus. Is that gonna be a fresh cuts, or are you taking that one for Creature?
No, it's a fresh cuts. That's
Okay.
a franchise movie. I'm good with doing that here.
Okay.
I would say like a new creature feature IP. Those are usually the ones that we like to jump on. So like stuff like Sting, even though we did let Sting be a fresh cuts, that's the kind of stuff that I would probably grab.
All right. Well, with that said, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back in a week with a new episode. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
If you see a wooden man, just leave. Just turn around and leave.
Peace.